Hard on the heels of Goethe's success with the play Gotz von Berlichingen, he comes out with a superstar hit in fiction, The Sorrows of Young Werther. Werther in the German, Werther for the rest of us, let's say, was a runaway success from the minute it came out. Huge popular support. It made him an international celebrity in the artistic world. Napoleon read it and told him upon meeting him that he had read it several times. This was a very big deal, which for a young man is an extraordinary thing. He was still in his early to mid-20s. He was still a practicing lawyer, even though he didn't want to be. So this was a blockbuster success right at the start of his career. He could play on that success for quite a while, and he did. The book itself is inspired by real situations, and if you're interested in his biographical analog, you go and you can find that. That information is out there. I don't particularly find all that very interesting. It falls into a category of the sentimental novels of the 18th century, stuff like Richardson's Pamela, Rousseau's Julie, or Oliver Goldsmith's The Vicar of Wakefield, which gets a very notable shout out in this book. These books often turn on domestic coded female matters and feature characters caught in doomed love affairs. They turn on a shared emphasis of sentimental feeling among the characters and among the characters and readers. That separation of special against the common, the elite against the herd, a celebration of the individual versus the group, and the particular over the universal. And this is a flip from the Enlightenment tradition, which always had a very general approach. And if you didn't, the universality of the Enlightenment sought to engage every reader, every viewer in a similar experience. And here, this is saying that this kind of art is coming out and saying, well, if you don't get it, then maybe you're just a little too coarse. If you don't get it, then maybe you're not special like us. And that's a key move in the late 19th century when you were going, or late 18th century, when you were going from the Enlightenment to the soon-to-be Romantic era. And it is part and parcel of the Sturm und Drang movement. The plot itself is relatively light, let's say. It is not a long book. Again, it is a very quick read, and it involves a young man, Werther. You could see some likenesses with the character of Goethe here, but a young man comes to a small provincial town where he has to settle some inheritance matters, basically a will that he has to help bring up. And he spends a little time there. He's in no particular rush to get back. He is evidently more sophisticated and wealthier than the local population. So he is just seeing to that. But he is coming, and he is a bit of a fish out of water because he is so very cultured and so very refined, let's say. And this is a refined person in fairly rustic surroundings. He meets a young girl, and he comes across her when she is babysitting her younger siblings, and she is cutting them little pieces of bread off a loaf and tossing it to them, and all the little siblings are just so giddy and happy and idyllic, and Werther is somewhat taken by this, and he falls in love with her, finds out she is engaged to be married to a somewhat older, about 10 years, but just more conventional person, a little bit more stable, perhaps, a little bit more dull, perhaps. But this is the story of a young man not unlike Goethe himself, who feels swollen with potential, swollen with greatness, quite frankly, and in a kind of oppositional pose to the world around him, who he feels necessarily a little underappreciated for who he is, for his innate genius, the beauty and talent that he has inside that nobody else seems to appreciate. And yeah, there has some woe is me qualities here, but you have to get over that for the book. Throughout the novel, Werther declares himself subject to these oppositional forces, these violent twists of fate and emotion. The very second letter of this story begins, "A wonderful serenity has taken possession of my entire soul." That surrender to the much larger force, the image of being captured by it, almost. And then it ends with, "The glory of these visions, their power and magnificence will be my undoing." Deeply vulnerable to these larger powers. This is not an objective view of the forces of nature. This is a completely subjective perspective, in thrall with nature, victimized by nature, vulnerable to nature in a kind of almost sensuous submission. He is always, the character of Werther is always caught in between these oppositional forces, and he is always struggling futilely against them. And the story itself bears itself out as he goes on to kill himself, and that is a surrender of sorts, a submission of sorts to larger forces. And you can read that in a number of different ways. The futility of a soul too delicate to live in this coarse world, or the ridiculousness of a young person who is swept up by emotions and loses all sense of perspective and ends tragically. And that is tragic in its way. But look at, before you get into the story, this story is trite, the love triangle, all that stuff. This story is not really all that much that's that interesting, quite frankly, to me at least. The point that I see, the value that I see in this story of Werther, is in its expression, in the way that it is pitched out there into the world, and the way that it catches fire and spawns the romantic movement as a whole. The largely spawns. He's not entirely responsible for it, but he is a very big part of it. Look at the two early chapters before the plot really begins. If the plot essentially begins when Lot and Werther meet, very touchingly, very beautifully, before then is the setting of the table for that action to take place. And in the chapters labeled the May 22nd and May 26th, you have before that meeting, before Werther meets Lot, the way these two short chapters, letters, play out gives you a sense of the character of Werther, but also the aesthetic character of the Sturm und Drang movement as a whole. That the life of man is but a dream has been sensed by many a one, and I, too, am never free of the feeling when I consider the restrictions that are placed on the active, inquiring energies of man, when I see that all our efforts have no other result than to satisfy needs, which in turn serve no purpose but to prolong our wretched existence, and then see that all our reassurance concerning the particular questions we probe is no more than a dreamy resignation, since all we are doing is to paint our prison walls with colorful figures and bright views? All of this, Wilhelm, leaves me silent. A little melodramatic, obviously, a little over the top, a little overwrought, a little, oh, woe is me, leaves me silent. He's never silent for long. I withdraw into myself and discover a world, albeit a notional world of dark desire rather than one of actuality and vital strength. Dark desire? Dark. Very much Goethe, very much the Romantic movement as a whole, but look at that. I withdraw into myself. That interior notion, that precious interior quality, the soul of humanity as an individual. That's Romanticism coming out right there. That is not the Enlightenment, where everything is supposed to be objective and you're viewing people from the outside as a kind of scientific experiment almost. Here you're inside one another, trying to see outside, trying to experience life from the inside of this person, from that perspective. And that particular perspective is highlighted. And everything swims before my senses, and I go my way in the world wearing the smile of the dreamer. All our learned teachers and educators are agreed that children do not know why they want what they want, but no one is willing to believe that adults too, like children, wander about this earth in a daze and, like children, do not know where they come from or where they are going, act as rarely as they do according to genuine motives, and are as roughly governed as they are by biscuits and cake and the rod. And yet it seems palpably clear to me. Children are largely absent from the Enlightenment. They are pre-adult entities that are just left to their own until they can grow into reasonable adults with whom you can have a conversation. That is the irrational element of childhood crashing headlong into the strict rationality of the Enlightenment. But this movement flips that on its edge, and children, with their irrational, untutored, unsophisticated way of looking at the world, are suddenly prioritized, are suddenly celebrated. And the rest of that little letter goes on about that particular character of children and how they should be looked to as a guide almost. And the whole phrase, the child is father to the man, that comes out a generation or so later, is coming from that. The value of accessing our inner child, very much an idea that is in play today in a lot of pop psychology, is stemming from this particular movement. And then the letter on May 26th. You know my old way of making myself a home, of pitching my humble shelter in some pleasant place and lodging there in the most modest of matters. Here, too, I have once again been attracted to such a spot. About an hour outside of town is a place they call Walheim. It is most engagingly situated on a hill, and when you are up above and following the path out of the village, you suddenly have a view across the entire valley. A kindly innkeeper, obliging and cheerful in her old age, has wine, beer, and coffee to offer, and best of all are the 2 linden trees, whose spreading boughs shade the little church square, which is surrounded by farmers' houses, barns, and yards. It has not been easy to find so pleasant and cozy a spot, and now I have my little table and my chair carried out of the inn, and drink my coffee there, and read my Homer. The first time I walked beneath these lindens, by chance one beautiful afternoon, I found the square perfectly deserted. Everyone was out in the fields except a boy about 4 years old, who was sitting on the ground and holding another child of perhaps 6 months that sat between his feet. He was holding it to his breast with both arms so that he served as a kind of armchair, and despite the vivacity that sparkled in his black eyes as he gazed around, he sat quite tranquilly. The sight delighted me. I sat down on a plough across from them and took great pleasure in drawing this brotherly picture. I added the fence that was near them, a barn door, and a few broken cart wheels, all simply the way it was, and after an hour I found I had produced a harmonious effect, a harmoniously correct and arresting drawing, without putting into it anything whatsoever of my own. This confirmed to me my resolve to keep to nature alone in future. Only nature has inexhaustible riches, and only nature creates a great artist. Yeah, okay, first of all, a couple of things. This quaint, idyllic little picture, this rustic picture that he is so enchanted by as an outsider, as a visitor, as a rich person coming to a small town and having people go around and fetch him coffee and wine and beer and bring his chair out for him so that he can sit. He is sitting there and he is sketching these little people out there because he is so entranced that they are so charming and so wonderful. And there is a little bit of condescension in that. There is a little bit of, oh, aren't they adorable? They're so rustic. And there is an undeniable element of condescension, of objectifying these people. But the thing that's really important here, aside from the fetishization of the primitive and the rustic, that is very much part and parcel with the Romantic movement to come, but it is the perspective or the framing device of art. Everything about this scene is about art. He is sitting there reading Homer, reading poetry, taking it all in, and then he starts to sketch. And this is Goethe telling us, okay, this is all to be understood as a work of art, a structure of artistic choices. And you see him sitting there correcting nature. He says, "Oh, nature is enough. Nature is everything you need. You don't have to supply anything new." But he does supply things. He said, "Well, this would look better with a wagon wheel, and let's just move things around and toss in some things and get rid of some other things and see what we can make of it." That is art, not nature. So the natural world is being highlighted here, and the way he is pointing it out, so obviously correcting from one another, is from one sentence to another. It's obviously him telling us that, well, all right, we need to understand that this character is a little swept up in art, and he is using art as his filter for reality. So he's not really living life so much as he's reliving art through life, or he's living life through art. You can argue that in a number of different ways, and this suggests the core problem at the heart of the relationship to come, of the plot that's about to kick into gear. When he sees Lot, and he sees her in a very charming, rustic setting where it's all very natural, and she's with her siblings, and they are yapping for food, and he is tossing them out, and all of that. He falls in love with her because of art, because they play out a little scene, they share something. In that scene, the thunder was passing by and wonderful rain was falling on the land, filling the warm air with the most refreshing fragrance. She stood there, resting on her elbows, gazing deep into the country about us. She looked to the heavens and to me, and I saw there were tears in her eyes, and she laid her hand on mine and said, "Klopstock," the famous German poet. At once I remember the glorious ode she had in mind, and was lost in the sensations that flooded me on hearing that name. This sentimental little moment where they are sharing a view out a window and during a thunderstorm. Thunderstorm is nature, untamable nature, and they are at a remove from that, but watching it and enthralled by it. And so in that moment, they think of something not of reality, not of nature, but they think of art, a poem, an ode by the poet Klopstock. And they share that little moment, and that becomes the great bonding moment between them. And from then on, they are linked in a way that bests all of the coarser, more common ways of communicating and dealing with one another. And certainly, Werther here feels an intimacy with her that he feels should be valued more than the more conventional intimacy of her relationship with her fiance, the coarse, somewhat materialistic, conventional guy Albert. And this is the core drama that gets set up. And again, the plot is kind of silly. You either get it or you don't. But what it is a avenue for a reassertion or for a primal assertion of certain values in art as a whole and life as well. And for the ones that have real significance and staying power, the primary one is nature. Nature overwhelms. The nature of the storm overwhelms. The nature of the human heart overwhelms. And they are all subject to it and have very little control of it because they lose their rationality. And part of that is emotions and sensors and senses are foregrounded here. It is not the rational, reasonable way of going through life. It is an emotional, sensual experience that is seen as somehow more vibrant, more alive, more in touch with the animal instincts of life, and a rejection of everything that they had learned from the Enlightenment. And that, of course, brings us back to children, the value of children, the perspective of children. Children are emphasized because they are exactly that, untutored in the ways of civilized Enlightenment culture. That coarseness or that unpolished, rough-hewn quality is in direct opposition to the Enlightenment broadly, but also that particular element of the Enlightenment in the Industrial Revolution and the capitalist development is that disdain for that bourgeois practicality. There is a sense in Werther that he is special because he is ignoring all of that, and that is largely true of Goethe as well. And you can see that tension getting worked out here as he is a practicing lawyer, which he does not want to be in his early 20s, and he wants to be an artist. And this book is really what gets him that ticket punched from being a responsible member of the legal profession to being an artist. And that is a core conflict within this, because as he seems to put it, art is equivalent to nature. Art is divine. Art is transformative. It elevates everything outside the ordinary, mundane, coarse world around us. And appreciation of art becomes a kind of secret society uniting the elite. The value of art is that it becomes something internal. It's not something to see out there. It's not just pictures and sculptures or books and something that you can have out there, but something that pulls at heartstrings, something for which you have a much more emotional or spiritual connection that moves you. And the Enlightenment figures do not want to be moved. They want to be rational, and they see life moving around them, and they're going to organize it. Here you have life moving people, art moving people, that sensory experience of art that is transformative. And for Goethe, this is primary, and that will become a cornerstone of the Romantic movement to come.